I'm going to be a stronger version of myself. I become more resilient in that process. Like it's the whole getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's where change happens. That's where growth happens. You have to be there or you will remain the same.
Michael Jordan says this thing. I love basketball.
Yeah.
And he says that you'll miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
When adversity came, I could have fell apart, but I chose instead to follow my heart. When adversity comes, I will never run. I will adjust, adapt, and overcome. Vision.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to your one-stop shop for everything empowerment. I am your host, Tariq Williams, and not only I am Vision of Hope, but we are Vision of Hope. And today, welcome back to the podcast. We have a special guest here today to kind of assist us, guide us, empower us to really talk about staying on track with our fitness goals, staying on track with our health, and getting into those topics here today. But first, without further ado, I want to introduce personal trainer Alexy Bantel.
Woo-hoo. Hello.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Alexy. Would you mind telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, obviously you want to know the fitness things. So I guess I'll just say I started working out about 10 years ago. Here I am now. I went to school, got my exercise science degree, which led me into the personal training world, which is ultimately what I wanted to do. So in 2019, I started officially personal training, and I've just been doing that ever since. So I've learned a lot about fitness and nutrition through the eyes of all of my clients, which has been really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. That's awesome. And so while you all are watching today, you checked out the title, right? And you're listening, you're here, you're trying to figure out how to make sure you're staying on track, getting some guidance here. And that's what Alexy and I are going to talk about today. And we kind of split up the video in 3 different sections. And we're going to talk a little bit about that mindset piece. You know, we talked about mindset here, getting into that fitness, those movements, and ending off with some nutrition. But first, talking about that mindset piece, right? I think that we so often think about fitness and being healthy and like, okay, eating, exercising, but we typically forget that there's a strong mindset piece to this, and thinking about like just why you're doing it, I think is so important. And like your wants and your why, the foundation of your why, and what your goals are. Would you agree with that, Alexy?
Oh yeah, 100%. The why I think is very important, right? Everybody starts to the gym and we all go to the gym because we want to look better, but there's something much deeper than that. So it's like the good old fashioned 5 why questions. It's like, well, why do you want to go to the gym? Because I want to get in shape. But why? Because I want to feel better about myself. But why? And it's just like digging until you get to like that inner why. And yeah, absolutely. I think that's the external motivation factor when that motivation is kind of lacking. So it's definitely good to know your why.
I know this isn't exactly like where we're going with the video today, but we talk about that why and that motivation piece. Where does discipline come in?
I think that just comes from building those habits over time. I think you build discipline almost like a skill. I think you get better with discipline over time, but I think you also have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's kind of how you build that skill of discipline, and just being consistent builds that skill. So like I always talk about consistency, again, we're going to detour, it's going to happen. But like, that's also where I think you get that discipline. And it's all about just finding consistent things that you can do, not trying to do things that are bigger. It's like whatever you can do consistently, start there and then work from there. That I think sometimes helps create motivation, because you're setting more attainable goals in the moment to reach to the bigger goal. But I also think it's important, like motivation doesn't exist all the time. So you have to build that kind of skill of discipline so that when the motivation is not there, you're kind of able to persevere, if you will, like through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that all right, that mindset, that motivation piece, what are some other concepts that you think are important?
In regards to that, or separate of that?
I guess a little bit of both.
Okay, so another one of my favorites, speaking about motivation when we lack motivation, is I'm really big on a 5-minute action.
Okay.
So it's just this idea of only committing 5 minutes to one thing. Because if I decide like, oh, I gotta go to the gym and get this hour workout in, that seems like a lot. But if you're like, oh, I'm just gonna spend 5 minutes, I'm gonna do some body weight squats. I only have to commit to 5 minutes. It's a lot easier for me to commit to. And then most of the time, once you're there, it kind of snowballs and it turns into a little bit more. And that kind of creates that momentum, which then gives you the motivation. So it's the whole idea of like, right, you need to create action to get that motivation. So I think just committing to 5 minutes is like something that we mentally kind of can do because it seems like nothing. And 5 minutes is better than nothing. So even if you did 5 minutes every single day, you still would be doing more than you talking yourself out of it. So I like to use that as another way to get motivation.
That's so interesting. A few years back, I used to go to see cardio isn't one of my favorite things to do, but
Me
but
neither.
but there was a span of time where a few years back where I went to Orange Theory. And at Orange Theory, it's kind of a hit workout gym, basically workout class type of thing, if for those who've never heard of Orange Theory before. And I remember sometimes like if I'm on the treadmill and I'm gassed and they're like, all right, 30 seconds all out. And in my head, I'm like, I could do anything for 30 seconds. You
Uh-huh.
know?
Exactly.
So
So
that's
you could
cool.
even break it down to that, right? Like I always tell people, it doesn't have to be 5 minutes, even if it's 2 minutes, or even if it's just like, okay, I'm just going to commit to driving to the gym, walking in the gym, and just starting my warm up. And if after my warm up and after my stretching, I don't feel like working out, I give myself the permission to go home. You
That's
try.
cool.
Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So like another concept where this kind of falls into it is I'm really big on no failure, only feedback.
Okay.
So like a lot of the times, right, you'd go to the gym, decide you don't want to, go home, and then you beat yourself up about it or you feel guilty about it. But it's just feedback. Like, well, why didn't you want to work out? Was it a hard day stressfully? Like in that
Mhm.
sense, you just need a break. Is your
Mhm.
body tired? Like just looking at how can I use this as feedback to kind of navigate and guide, I think is important because I think we're often way too hard on ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I do find myself sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit stressed, though, I need that outlet,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I was working out the other day and I got some news that I didn't necessarily love, and I was like, all right, let's put some heavier weight on here. I need to get this out.
Yep.
So that's cool though.
Yeah.
And what are some other concepts that you typically think about getting back to that staying on track piece when you're transitioning in your life and or holidays, vacation? What are some other things that you would have people at least make a priority or think about?
I mean, those are kind of the big things for me, just baby steps, one thing at a time, only taking on like small things at a time and kind of building off of that.
Hmm.
Because again, I think we often take on too much and then it's really hard to stay consistent with that. So, I mean, the big things for staying on track and what I communicate to my clients is consistency, number
Hmm.
one.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's honestly probably the biggest thing in order to stay on track with like your workouts and your nutrition. You have to choose things that you can consistently do over and over and over because the most optimal plan is no good if you can't be consistent with it. A suboptimal plan is going to be better if you can be consistent with it.
Yeah,
So, and I think you can everything falls into consistency,
yeah,
right? Your mindset, having grace with yourself, like
right.
that falls into, you still have to be consistent doing that.
Yeah,
Just showing up for yourself, those kinds of things, being a little bit disciplined, doing the 5-minute action. If you can be consistent with all of the concepts, then you're good. You just have to find a way to make the concepts fit into your life. Because that's the other thing is like, I can tell everybody how to stay on track, but you have to find a way to also make all of these things work for you because everybody's different. Everybody's life is different.
absolutely. We started off with that mindset and that motivation piece, and that why, right? And I'll even go back a little bit here and just say, even that thought process and thinking that you can is huge, right?
Yep.
Like saying like I can be healthy, or I can't. You know what I mean? Like I feel like we so often might even think about this negativity piece. That might come up with thinking about why you can't do something. And I just, even when I'm talking to people, I'm just like, well, why can you do it? You know? Why
Yeah.
can you? And not letting those limiting beliefs take over. Another thing I think of, and you and I were talking about this before briefly, that when we think about being healthy, we often forget about the importance of sleep. Would you mind getting into
Mm.
the importance of why sleep is so important?
I mean, sleep helps everything in life.
Right.
When I prioritize my sleep, my quality of life just improved. I mean, I function better at work. I function better in my relationships. I just cognitively feel better. When it comes to staying on track, what's everybody having the hardest part with? Cravings. I mean, sleep can really help cravings. Sleep helps you gain muscle. Sleep helps you burn fat. Like it's our restorative state. So, and I don't think it's something that a lot of us do prioritize. And then the holidays come and we're busier and, we're with family. And then we also throw alcohol into the mix, which can interfere with our sleep. And I think when we don't prioritize our sleep, everything else over time starts to fall off. So, I mean, for me, when I prioritized my sleep, like I said, it changed my quality of life, but like, it's not easy like anything else, right? You have to find what works for you.
Right.
So, I mean, like I've created rules generally for myself. I try not to be on my phone in bed. There's no TV in my bedroom. Like bed is for sleeping. I used to do everything in my bed, eat in my bed, watch Netflix in my bed, work in my bed, and it made it very hard to fall asleep. So, I mean, there's a bunch of different things that you can do, but I mean, essentially sleep is just important for all aspects. You're just going to function more optimally. Your body's going to be more in a state to do the things that you want to do because you're allowing it to rest and recover.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And finally, to kind of help us transition a little bit, you mentioned consistency before, right? And that consistency piece is so important. Nobody sees like that, those results where you go to the gym for one day and it's an over time progression, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so one of my favorite things, if it's trying to find ways to lose weight or stay healthy or whatever, that consistency piece is important. But something that I think is cool, like a cool acronym, would be NEAT. And NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, just a cool way of saying just live an active lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like playing like with your little cousins or nieces or nephews or whatever, or hanging out with the family, going on a walk, is just, I think, incorporating different ways to be healthy and keep your body moving. And so when we're talking about living actively and having that active lifestyle, when we're doing different things and trying to stay on track with our goals, I think just going on a walk could be super important, right? Like making the time, maybe waking up a little bit early to go on a walk, or being like, hey, who wants to go for a walk like after lunch or whatever? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think walking is so important.
Yeah. I mean, just being up and moving, even doing household activities, right? Or the good old fashioned park in the further parking spot. Like I try to do that. I tell my clients, take the stairs. I have a client and she lives on the 6th floor and I tease her all the time. I'm like, why are you taking the elevator? You should be taking the stairs. Like that's such an easy way to just get some extra steps in over the day, or like get a standing desk, stand at your standing desk. Like that's even going to be just a little bit more than sitting. So if you can find all of these little places to, get your steps in, then I think that's an excellent way to just stay active, especially if you're not doing your scheduled workouts and you're like, oh no, what do I do? How do I keep up? Life's so busy. It's like, just find a way to keep moving. Just keep yourself moving.
We have a few friends that live in Colorado, and we visited them, and they live on the 3rd floor. An elevator doesn't exist. And so by the time I get to the top, I'm like, gosh, woo. You know? But I think just like once again, finding those ways to keep moving and everything. But if you're able to get some exercises in or some workouts in, what are some key movements, and we can go back and forth on this, that you think are important to try to incorporate?
So overall, I would say your big bang for your buck movements, but what are your big bang for your buck movements, right? So anything that's a compound movement versus an isolated movement. So again, compound is like we're working multiple muscle groups at once versus isolated where you're probably just only targeting one specific area. So like compound movement would be like a squat, working multiple muscle groups, big bang for your buck movement versus I'm going to do a bicep curl. Not really as much bang for your buck. You're just working that singular bicep. Like you'd be better off doing a barbell row, more big bang for your buck. You're hitting your back, hitting your shoulders, your core. So I would really say any of those compound movements that are working multiple muscle groups typically are going to give you a little bit more, especially if you're pinched for time, like do those movements and save the isolated movements for at the end, or if you have time.
So something like a squat, I feel like if you're doing a barbell squat or like there's a few different variations, but what would you tell someone to make sure that they're squatting with proper form? Like what would be like 2 or 3 key things to think about if somebody wants to start squatting consistently and effectively?
The two biggest things I would say is focus on your feet and your knees.
Okay.
So feet meaning I like to think of a tripod on the bottom of my foot. So like you have one point on your heel and then one point under your big toe and one point under your pinky toe. And you always want to think about your weight being evenly distributed along the foot the entire time. And if you focus on your feet, everything from the bottom up kind of starts to take care of itself in a lot of cases. So instead about thinking like all these crazy cues, sometimes just going back to the feet, making sure that you're evenly distributed on that weight is a good cue. And then just always making sure you're driving your knees out. You don't want your knees caving in a squat. So you want your knees to be traced over your pinky toes. Other than that, just keep the upper body and core tight. Don't overthink the rest.
For sure. For sure. I think some of my favorites are something like I like to make sure I'm incorporating. Would be like the push-ups or like a chest press if I can get into the gym. Because I just overall, like if I'm doing some of those compound movements like you were just talking about, I just overall feel a little bit better when I get out of the gym. Will I do like an occasional like arm day? Sure, I will sometimes. If I feel like I have time, but I just feel a little bit better when I'm able to hit some of those compound movements. I feel like my overall body, once you get, I like what you were saying before, those more bang for your buck movements.
Yeah. I agree. I feel also like a lot of those movements, something like a squat, right, versus like a bicep curl, or like if you want to compare legs, like just sitting on a leg extension, it's more functional to do the squat. Like you're working the overall body, which translates then into your day-to-day life. So yeah, you probably get those endorphins and you mentally feel good when you leave, but also I'm sure your body just functions better and you move in your day-to-day life feeling better doing something like a squat versus just sitting on a piece of fixed equipment and extending your leg. So I also think it's a good big bang for your buck because it's also a very functional movement. We squat every day in our life multiple times.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I love it.
And I feel like you mentioned dumbbell row earlier a bit, or barbell row, excuse me.
Any kind of row, honestly.
Any kind of row. Okay. I feel like every time I walk into the gym, lat pull down is staring at me. Like, you want to do this exercise.
I do love the lat pull down.
Yeah. It incorporates a lot of different movements, right?
It does, but I would challenge you and say, do a pull up. That's going to give you more bang for your buck than the lat pull down.
And why do you say pull up? I mean, pull ups, one of my favorites, but why do you say pull up over lat pull down?
The lat pull down's easier. You're sitting, you're fixed in the seat, and you just have to worry about pulling it down. Yeah. You have to stabilize so much more in a pull-up. You're using your core so much more in a pull-up. It's a lot more challenging to pull up your entire body weight than like pulling it down on the lat pull down machine when your legs are fixed underneath. It's a more challenging movement.
So what if someone's trying to work up to being able to do a pull-up?
Mhm.
What are some of the ways they should try to, I would say, get stronger to be able to do a pull-up?
My best recommendation is find a way to actually do the pull-up. So find an assisted variation. So like you have assisted pull-up machines, you could use something like that, or you can use resistance bands. So you could do like a resistance band pull-up. You could do negative pull-ups. So you just like hop up to the bar and then resist gravity on the way down, right? So maybe if the resistance band is too much, that would be a way to intensify yourself. So I would say ultimately you want to do the pull-up to get good at the pull-up. So if you can find an assisted way, in a way where even if it's just like 2 reps or 3 reps that you can get, make them good form, focus on the range of motion, then you just add reps over time. So that's what I would recommend. You could do lat pull downs, you can do rows. Those are all good. They're all going to strengthen your back. But if you want to get good at pull-ups, do the pull-ups.
Yeah, I remember like when I first started doing pull-ups, I just thought it was a neat exercise and go from like 2 to 4 to 5, and it just continued building, you know. I feel like it's always a good benchmark whenever I try to do some type of workout. If I feel like I've been like not as consistent or not, I just do some pull-ups and see how many I can do. And that kind of tells me like, okay, like I'm not where I was, or I'm doing great, you know?
Yeah, well, to be fair, I do think it's one of those things that if you don't practice it, you start to lose it. I mean, it's like anything, but as soon as you start practicing it again, you pick it right up. Because like that's something I noticed. I cannot do as many pull-ups as I used to be right now, but also it's not in my programming. It's not been my focus. I'm trying to keep my lats or give them a break. So it's like, yeah, but if you've done them consistently before, it's very easy to get that back. You just have to practice it. It's the adaptation of the body. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, one of the other things I like to incorporate, even like specifically when I'm at home, I like to find like 2 or 3 exercises or 3 or 4 exercises and seeing like let's say maybe I'll do like push-ups, like jumping jacks, and maybe sit-ups maybe, and do like 10 for each, and then like see how many rounds I can do, like 4 rounds, you know?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. I'll maybe incorporate a plank or some jumping jacks to really get my heart rate moving as well.
Yeah. I love doing that, especially when you have like a time constraint, maybe call it an AMWRAP, as many rounds as possible. So maybe you're doing pull-ups, push-ups, and body weight squats. You're like, okay, I'm doing 10 reps, 10 reps, 10 reps. I've got 10 minutes. How many times can I run through this? So yeah, I think that's a great thing to do as well. If you're pinched on time or you're trying to get your heart rate up or just squeeze something in, again, more bang for your buck, right? You're just taking advantage of your time that you have.
Absolutely. And you know, like it's, you know, I can't believe like how quickly time flies sometimes, right?
I
And
know.
so finding ways to even get something quick in. You mentioned that 5-minute thing. I love that.
Yeah.
So I
Exactly. Commit to 5 minutes. That's all you need.
exactly. And like look at the clock. Well, I got maybe 5-10 more, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I love that. That's super cool. And so, well, now we talked about those concepts, that mindset, and we're talking about how to carry those through if we're not feeling motivated, or if we're recognizing how important being consistent is. And it's having that active lifestyle. And we went through those movements. But finally, I feel like the elephant in the room is nutrition, right?
Yes.
Because, you know, I've heard people say like, you know, you don't like abs, or a solid core is made in the kitchen, you know?
Yeah.
So what are some nutrition tips that you would give people to help them stay on track?
So I think especially through the holidays, I do want to go back to how you say like to have grace with yourself,
Yes.
because I think that's really important. I think the holidays are meant to be enjoyed with your family. It's meant to be enjoyed through your traditions and your cultures with food. So I think we should not restrict ourselves of those things during the holidays, and we should kind of have grace with ourselves through that. And also when you do restrict those things, it just makes you want them more. And then when you have them, it kind of becomes a free for all. So I think also just like that psychological concept of restricting and then binging, it's just like this swing of the pendulum. I think is something important to just have that knowledge, but yeah, have grace with yourself and enjoy the delicious foods. Like I'm not going to not eat pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving. That is my favorite Thanksgiving food. Like I'm
Right.
not going to not eat it. I'm eating the pumpkin pie.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So then when you're fixing your plate or anything, see, that's the thing. I'm not a pie person.
That's okay.
Boo, I know,
I'm a stuffing person too.
Mhm,
So I don't know. Pumpkin pie has just always been my thing of
mhm.
Thanksgiving.
And like, so I guess when you're developing or you're getting your plate together, is there anything that you even have any thoughts of, or you're like, what is your thought process, I guess, when you're even creating a plate or trying to figure out what would be
Always
sufficient?
protein first.
Yeah.
Protein is always the priority.
Mhm,
Most of us don't eat enough protein unless you track your protein or you make a conscious effort to eat it. Most of us are not eating enough.
mhm.
And protein is important to maintain our muscle. We want more muscle. We have more muscle. We burn more calories while doing absolutely nothing. It just helps our metabolism. It keeps our metabolism revved, if you will. So definitely prioritize your protein. So I would just make sure you always have protein on your plate, whether maybe you're snacking at appetizers, like sign me up for deviled eggs and shrimp because
Yeah.
that's how I get my protein in. And then I let myself have the chips or like whatever it may be. So even in that instance, prioritize my protein. And then of course at dinner, making sure I got enough turkey on that plate.
Yeah.
And you can go the extra mile to eat the protein first on your plate. Because if you eat the stuffing and you eat the mashed potatoes and whatever else sides you have, and then you go to the protein, you're probably going to be a little full. So I think just prioritizing protein on your plate, but also eating it first is a good thing to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. Always having protein on your plate. I think that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And what you mentioned, even just having more protein, that'll even help you with even staying full, right?
Oh, yeah.
And,
It's very satiating.
mhm. And so for sure, and it helps with the recovery and all that good stuff. So that protein for sure is super important.
Yeah.
I know my weaknesses personally, like, well, this isn't necessarily a holiday food, but I guess kind of is. But popcorn. I love popcorn.
Popcorn's great.
Popcorn's great, and it's high in fiber. So I'm a big popcorn fan. I've been recently even like making some myself as well, like if I'll just use the kernels instead typically.
Yeah.
But I love all popcorn. Well, I'm not really into like the very sweet popcorn. I'm not really into that.
Yeah, me neither. Salty popcorn. Definitely.
I can't really get into that. And also macaroni and cheese.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
one of my favorites. I'll make it from scratch. It's a whole. I love it. I love it.
Yes, same. Add some
Um,
easy mac and cheese. You can just throw some ground beef in there. You can throw turkey in there, like whatever you wanted. I throw meat in my mac and cheese all the time because
mhm,
then I get that protein in and it just becomes a more well-balanced meal, right? I've got my proteins, my fats, and my carbs now. If you just eat the
yeah.
mac and cheese, the protein's missing. So
Right. Right.
yeah.
And so, fun fact for everybody, actually, and I don't always do this, kind of depends on where or who I'm making the macaroni and cheese for. But something that you could do even is like there's different. Actually, I'm not gonna give you all my secret recipes. So I'm not gonna get into this today. But there are even different ways to even have sodium, if you need some sodium for your dishes, maybe mixing in a few different things, because there's different vegetables out there that may or may not release some sodium if they're cut up in a certain, or not in a certain, just cut up and mixed in with whatever it is you're trying to make. So like, I feel like what I really like enjoy doing when I'm cooking is experimenting in the kitchen, seeing what I can or can't do. And don't get me wrong, I've had some things turn out really well, and some things I'm like, I might not try that again. But I enjoy having fun in the kitchen. And you mentioned having that grace with yourself, and
Yep.
um I think even that balance, sometimes I think about like, instead of like completely loading on my plate, maybe having a plate, and if I'm still hungry, then getting more.
Mhm.
Things I'm thinking about with when it comes to my nutrition.
Yeah, I think another really important thing in terms of nutrition and like eating and the holidays is being present in your eating.
Okay.
So a lot of times, we're watching TV or we're wrapped up in what people are saying, or we're so excited to eat the food that we haven't been allowing ourselves to eat. So we eat it so fast. So I think even just slowing down, putting your fork down between bites, taking time to really just like be present in the meal and like savor what you're eating and enjoying the moment is a
Yeah.
great way to get you to slow down, to not also overeat. And it just makes you enjoy your food so much more when you're present in that moment.
Right. Right. And we talked about it already. Time is flying. Like it's,
Yeah.
and so it's so important to stay present and just
Yep.
enjoy the time with your friends, your family, and your relationships, or even you mentioned grace, and I talk about that in one of my previous videos, but even having that grace for yourself to even enjoy a meal even on your own.
Yeah.
And if you're just relaxing, I think that alone time and getting that time for peace is also important. And it's different for everybody, right? I enjoy hanging out and talking with people, but I also like setting aside time for myself to decompress.
Same. Definitely need that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess overall, when we're talking about the mindset, the movements, the staying, the exercising, the nutrition piece, and trying to make sure that we're being president of being president. What
We
am I
could do that
talking?
too.
Being present in your eating. I like that. What are some, I guess, final tips that you would really tell people to make sure they're staying on track, or the fact that they want to stay on track, right? What are some of the things that you would make sure that you want them to take away from listening to us today?
Consistency, 100%. That is number one, always.
Mhm,
I would say consistency,
mhm.
stay moving, and prioritize your protein. Those, I would say those are the three habits that every one of my successful clients has and focuses on and makes a non-negotiable. Sleep, yes, you can add that in there too if we created more tiers, if you will. I think sleep is also important, but
Mhm.
in terms of just like staying on track, which typically means like doing my workouts and staying on track with my nutrition, I would say those are the three biggest things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. No, I'll just add on one last thing. And I mean, who knows, maybe I'll ramble and add a couple others. But
Love it.
I think that going back to that why piece, right?
Yep.
Figuring out why you're doing what you're doing. And when I think about, I don't want to do any exercises or whatever, or I don't want to necessarily do my squats or my push-ups or whatever, or go on a treadmill or go for a walk, I start to think about, well, I want my body to be healthy, right? And I think about, and in my family, I know different people who are going through different health issues and stuff like that. And I just think about how to make sure I'm staying consistent. It goes really back to that piece. And
Yep.
I deserve it to myself, and you deserve it to you, everybody who's listening, to be that healthy version of yourself. I think is just so important.
Yeah. I like that you said, like, yeah, we deserve it.
You
And sometimes
deserve
we have
it.
to tell ourselves that because, again, we're really hard on ourselves. So having that grace and letting ourselves know, like, you deserve to have this, you deserve to feel your best self, I
Yeah.
think is something good to remind yourself of.
It's like I have to do these push-ups, or I deserve to do these push-ups. Let's do
Exactly.
this.
Exactly. I'm going to be a stronger version of myself. I become more resilient in that process. Like, it's the whole getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's where change happens. That's where growth happens. You have to be there or you will remain the same. It's just sometimes it is that simple. It's just not simple in the moment.
Right. When I first started getting into exercising and working out, I honestly didn't think I ever could become a stronger version of myself, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to the gym or starting to work out and everybody's stronger than me, everybody's running faster than me, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And it took me a little bit to recognize and realize that I'm on my own journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I, once again, like I feel like I deserve it to myself to just give myself a shot and to say that I can do this. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Because if you think that you can't, either way, you're going to be right. And two, you know, if you're already thinking that you can't, then that effort piece, that motivation piece, you've already, Michael Jordan says this thing. I love basketball.
Yeah.
And he says that you'll miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Yep.
Believe in yourself, keep doing what you're doing. And I think if you listen to what Alexy and I were talking today, I think you'll definitely come across with some healthy habits that'll help you through transitions and keep you on track for the holidays. Alexy, do you have anything else?
No, I think that was it. Stay consistent
Yeah.
and have grace with yourself. I would say that needs to fit in with the three, in all
Love,
three. Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank
Well,
you so
Alexy,
much.
yeah, thank you so much for being here, Alexy. I really appreciate it. We'll definitely have to do this again. I think this was
Yeah.
really neat. And once again, Alexy, if anybody is looking for you, want to work with you, where can they find you? And we'll make sure we put it in the description below. And while you're in the description and looking at all of Alexy's great content and her services, hit that like and hit that subscribe button while you're down there.
Mash the thumbs up button. Definitely.
But where can people find you?
Facebook is the best place to find me. That's where I spend 90% of my time. So definitely my Facebook page, or yeah, YouTube, Instagram. I'm not a TikTok gal yet. I haven't figured that out yet. But yeah, those are the places to find me. So definitely find me and let me know what you want to see.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexy. I
Thank
hope
you.
everybody enjoyed the podcast, enjoyed the video today. And welcome, everybody. And thank you for being here. And once again, not only I am Vision of Hope, but we are Vision of Hope. Have a good one, everybody.
When adversity came, I could have fell apart, but I chose instead to follow my heart. When adversity comes, I will never run. I will adjust, adapt, and overcome. Vision.